Would you for a moment consider with me what an extravagant display of love really looks like? Today we're going to look at the picture, what love looks like when it's in action. Have you ever received a very generous gift? Maybe a little bit of jewelry, maybe someone did something really nice for you without you even asking. Maybe even someone was a radical and expensive gift they've given to you. And it kind of gives you this picture that, man, you care about me. Well, one of the most extravagant gifts ever given was the Taj Mahal. Just a few stats on it. It was made in 1643. That was the year it started building. And it cost about 32 million rupees back then, which actually translate to right now, it would translate to about $421 million. We're talking about a very expensive thing. It took about 20,000 people to construct over 20 years. And there's about 8 million tourists that go to it every single year. And there's about 40 different types of precious stones. Now, why was the Taj Mahal called this gesture of love? Well, very simply, the guy that made it actually built it for his wife as a gesture of love. Their tomb is in there at this moment, and they're buried there together. But it was this massive gesture that he made to his wife to say, man, I love you. I truly love you. And so if you've ever wondered what it looks like when we put love into action, well, there's a little glimpse of it. A little glimpse that we can see that when love is put into action, it becomes extremely extravagant. It becomes a place where it's so big that we cannot even grasp why a person would do such a thing. And sometimes we need to find that concept for us when we think about God. When you think about the love that He has for us, what does it look like in a practical way? And maybe if He says that love is within us, what does that look like in a practical way for me and you every single day? You see, this is how God makes love tangible to us, is He shows His love for us through Jesus Christ. He gives His life so that we could have life. But it didn't start off that easily. It actually started off with a moment that Peter had in a vision. So let me take you back to this moment where Peter actually starts opening up the borders in this picture of love. You see, Peter has a vision that God gives him in Acts. We read about it in Acts 10. And in this moment, it says this, is that Peter went up to a housetop about 6 in the morning on the 6th hour to pray. And he became hungry and wanted something to eat. Have you ever been there praying and you need some food, right? But while you were preparing it, he fell into a trance and saw the heavens open and something like a great sheet descending, being let down by its corners on the earth. And it was, and it says that in it, all kinds of animals, reptiles, birds of the air. And there came a voice saying, "Rise, Peter, kill and eat." So to the vegetarians, I'm really sorry, but this is biblical. But it says, "Peter, rise and kill and eat." And then Peter said, "By no means, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is uncommon or unclean." And a voice from him came a second time, and he said, God said to him, "What God made that was clean, do not call common." And in this moment, what is he saying? Well, we have to understand the Jewish perspective of this, is that there were animals that you could eat that would make you unclean because of how they were seen. So like sheep would be animals that are clean, but pigs, for instance, would not be. And in this moment, God shows a vision to Peter and saying, look at all these unclean animals. You can now partake in eating them. And for Peter, it was a big no-no. Because in that moment, he realized that if he does this, he would now be unclean. But in this conversation, in this vision, God is actually showing something way bigger to Peter. He's trying to give him a better meaning to understanding that the boundary of what they've been believing has now extended because of the gospel. So in this brand new definition, you have to understand that just before that, in the opening part of Acts 10, Peter meets a Gentile called Cornelius in Afrikaans, if you want to say it that way. But Cornelius was a man that was not a Jew, he was a Gentile, and he was an unclean man. But here Peter and Cornelius have this conversation because Cornelius actually knew God. He was in a relationship with God because of the gospel, because of being saved. And in this conversation, they are actually speaking about God together. But Peter can feel that, it's a bit of tension because, Cornelius is a Gentile and he's a Jew. So how does it work? And this vision actually comes to show Peter something beautiful. It comes to show him that everyone who believes in Jesus will be saved. Later in verse 43, we read it. It says this, "To him all the prophets bear witness that everyone who believes in him receives forgiveness for sins through his name." This is a huge moment in the history of the church. Why is this a huge monumental moment? Well, this is the moment that we realize that every single person, we saw it for the first time, that chooses Jesus will be saved. Whether your background is Jewish or Gentile, Afrikaans or English, Sotho, Xhosa, whatever it may be, that does not relate to the thing that changes our lives, the person that changes our lives, that is Jesus. That does not relate to whether you qualify to receive God's love or not. It is the fact that He loves you that qualifies you. And that opens up a brand new understanding for these people. It actually opens up the thing to say that it's no matter your social economic status or your race or your gender or anything that determines whether you can be loved by God. It is actually a moment where God says, man, I love everyone. My circle is made bigger. And this is a massive story. I mean, I'm reminded of a story. There's a guy that's been joining our church for the past few weeks. And remember having the conversation with him. He actually sent us a message after church and he said, listen, I'm a self-proclaimed atheist and I've been coming to your service. And I want to say that the first time in my life, Christianity starts making sense, but I want to have a conversation. And so we had a good conversation. And his words to me was this simple. He said, before church, I always felt like people were bombarding me with me trying to, I have to fix my life or I'm a sinful person. But for the first time in a church, people just accepted me as I was in that moment and started loving me. And that person has been sitting in our church for the past few months, actually coming week in, week out, very dedicated. Still hasn't probably met Jesus, but they're in a place where they are loved and they have the opportunity to meet Jesus just because we made it an inclusive picture. And that's what Peter sees in this moment, in this vision. He says, man, everyone is included into this picture. See, God's love is inclusive. That's what He does. When we speak about this extravagant love of God, it is extremely inclusive. But we read this in Acts 1 verse 8 that says this, "But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in all Judea and Samaria, until the ends of the earth." You see, God is taking this moment to say, man, my love is not exclusive. It is inclusive. It is inclusive to all people, to every single person that believes in me. And this is really good to hear because that means there's nothing that's keeping us away from God. But in the other hand, I also want to say that means for us, there should be no exclusivity. There should be inclusivity every single time we hang out with people. Whenever we're around people, when we see people, we can't say, God will love them. We need to love them as well. We need to have that same inclusivity with people. Like one of the great theologians that said this, he wrote a song that is so good. A guy named J.R. It's called Show Them, Make the Circle Bigger. South African theologian, amazing guy. But that is how we should live. We should live in a place where we make the circle bigger to different cultures, to different people, so that maybe that atheist, that person can join church and actually experience God's love firsthand. You see, God's love does also one thing. It doesn't leave us disqualified. You see, God's love is not one that disqualifies us. It's actually one that is qualifying us. When we read the moment of Peter's vision, seeing this moment that he qualifies the unclean to be clean. He's saying, now what I have made, that is still clean, that is still beautiful. And that's the picture that he has for us. You see, the problem for us sometimes is that we think that we're disqualified to experience God's love. But God's reaction to that has always been, man, I've loved you. Even while you were a sinner, I have loved you. And He invites us to say, just say yes to this love. You see, I think our big problem in life is that some people know God's love for them. They hear about God's love for them, but they think that they do not deserve that love. And here's the truth today. I want to tell you, maybe the only person that has been keeping you away from God's love is you. And maybe the step for you is to step into that love, to step into that truth, to lean in, to press into who God is. And you are going to experience that love firsthand. So what does that look like for us in life? What makes God's love different? Well, it's very different. God's love is not exclusive, it is inclusive. It goes beyond boundaries. It says that all people are invited to Him. And that is extravagant love. He is literally opening up His hands wider than ever before and inviting people into the picture. Well, getting back to the picture of the Taj Mahal, that is an extravagant picture of love. That this man had such a love for his wife that he made something so amazing. You see, it wasn't the things that the wife did for him. It wasn't like she did good cooking and she was a really nice person and she did the good things in life that made him go, okay, she's a good person. Let me give her love. Let me be extravagant. No, it was the fact that he looked at her and he said, you are my prized possession. You are the person in my life that I love the most. You are the one that I can't keep my eyes off of. Therefore, the only way to express that is in a practical way, to build something like the Taj Mahal. And that's the same way God looks at me and you. That's the same way He looks at us and He says, I've seen you. And I mean, the nice, good things you've done, that's nice. But the thing that changes my heart to be extravagant is the fact that I look at you in the way that God has made you. And man, I love you. And that's how He looks at us. He looks at us in that same way. And what would happen if we start looking at the world in that way? John 13, you've heard it a bunch of times. We've been reading this as a church for a while. But this scripture is so good. It says, Jesus giving a new command. He says, let me give you a new command. He says, love one another in the same way that I have loved you. And then if you don't catch it, He kind of says it again. You love one another. And why this calling? Why this commandment that Jesus puts in our hands? Because, and this is the important part for me, it says, this is how everyone will recognize that you are my disciples when they see the love when they see the love you have for each other. That is like the essence of Christianity. That's the picture that God has for us, is that when people walk into the room and they see how we love people, they will see God. And that's the call that God has for us. He's saying, man, open up the circle, become inclusive, become a place where you make the circle bigger, invite people into your life, invite people that are outside of the boundary and show them what love looks like. Because when they see the love that you have for other people and for them, they will see the love that I have for them. We are God's hands and feet, and He has invited us to live that life. So what does that mean for us? Imagine a world where people could experience God's love through you. Wouldn't that be amazing? Isn't that a great calling that God put on our hands? Well, then the next step would be to ask this question. Who is that one person outside of your boundary that you need to go show love to? That one person that's just outside of that reach, not just a family member, but someone just outside of the circle, outside of that comfort space that God is calling you to love. Well, I hope this helped you, and I trust that you are moved in your spirit and in your heart to take a step and make love practical in the world around you. Go build Taj Mahals all over the space that people can experience God's love in an extravagant way. If you want to, you can share this to friends and family and encourage them to love the way that God has loved. I hope you have a fantastic week further. Cheers.